and we are into financial and we are into farm, non-farm, and financial inclusion space. And it gives me a great privilege to welcome all of you. It's not easy to get up early in the morning for a 10 a.m. session. It's so harsh out there. So thank you once again for joining us. And over to Vipin to kind of, set the context. Thank you so much once again.
So Access, we spoke, so we are now in our 17th year, and we keep doing these summits and all that. So this is the 14th year of the Livelihoods India Summit, but this is only something at the national level that we do. But more important for us is that we engage a lot at the grassroots level with communities, and we actually our big work is programs on the ground. And in these 17 years, we also work on like a 5-year strategic plan basis. So every 5 years, we want to do some introspection in terms of what we are doing. Is it relevant? Is it making a difference or what? So we are now in our fourth 5-year plan. And at some point around 2016, when we entered the third 5-year plan and we checked on the reality in terms of how we are aligned with issues in the ecosystem, we realized that it's critical that we work with women. So that's when actually, as Access, we started to uh, not by default, but more by design, to seek opportunities in being able to work on the issue of women's economic empowerment. So we all here, I mean, very strong civil society organizations. Everybody has a clutch of their own programs. They're working on various things, I'm sure doing very well. But if there is an issue which is like really critical, uh, I feel, and as an organization, we feel that it's very important for all of us to come together. So you get a very different kind of a multiplier. So we know issues about how much women contribute to the GDP, what is the labor force participation, where are we on the global gender index and all that stuff. That's fine, but unless, I mean, if we feel that as an organization we are committed to advancing the agenda of women's economic empowerment and women entrepreneurship, I feel that we need to strengthen our voice as a lot of organizations, whether it's a network or it's an alliance or it's a platform or whatever. In the past, Girija might know because she's been associated with the whole evolution of Access. We spun out of Care, a successful microfinance program, and in those early years of microfinance, the MFIs were facing a lot of challenges. And when we came out, we said we need to, although there were industry platforms like Sadhan and all existing, we said if we have to give MFIs a voice to give them more credibility and legitimacy within the ecosystem, we need to bring together all the stakeholders. And we started something called the Access Microfinance Alliance. And at some stage, we had 123 who participated in that alliance. And because there was a large group of 123 microfinance institutions backed and supported by Access, we were able to engage with policymakers, with the regulators, and all that kind of stuff. So as Access, we do a couple of things which may have an impact, which may be able to inform, influence policy. But unless we don't come together around this very critical theme of women's economic empowerment, perhaps we may not be able to push the policymakers to think a little more. So when we look at women's entrepreneurship, whether it relates to finance, whether it relates to their skilling, whether it relates to their ability to negotiate in the marketplace, or whether it is any push at the level of the society or the family. I mean, they face so many challenges. So even if we look at the policy environment, there aren't any dedicated programs which are composite in nature to kind of push this agenda. So I mean, saying Nari Shakti and women-led development is a good thing to, be talking about. But how does it translate into policies which are conducive to that idea? So we need to look at a whole lot of things. So it's just a very initial sort of maybe more like brainstorming in terms of does it make sense to for all of us to come together, and if we do, then what could be the agenda, what could be the terms of reference of a network like this? So right now, I might be coming to say that let's come together as a part of a program that has been given to us by a donor. But these kind of things transcend a project or a program. So I mean, the funding will come to an end in 2 years. Then are you going to stop this network thing if we have started to work on it, or is there a way of continuing? So everybody has to actually put out their individual institutional commitment to being a part of the network and pushing it forward. So we need to transcend that this is being cobbled because of a program opportunity that we have. So I'll stop here, but thank you very much. I think we have a good number, and right now it's only very initial ideating on whether it's making sense, and if it is, how do we all come together. So thank you very much, everybody. I know it's really, really cold today, but you guys made it so great.
So thank you so much, Vipin, for setting the context. And as you rightly said, that this is an exercise towards ideation of looking at the possibility of having this network or a coalition or a forum, whatever we decide to call it. But before we get into the nitty gritties of this, for which I would look up to Smita Premchandar, who's going to be moderating this discussion. Smita is, as most of you would know, is Director Sampark and is a development sector expert. And but before we get into the session, this discussion, I would request each one of you to kindly introduce yourself around the table. So maybe we can start from Pritha. Breakthrough. Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pritha, and I represent an organization called Breakthrough. And in Breakthrough, we work with adolescents and we work in schools through a gender transformative curriculum. And currently, we are working in partnership with Orissa and Punjab governments, where the curriculum that we have proposed has been integrated as part of their textbooks. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Prema Gera. I am currently advising development alternatives on their entrepreneurship portfolio. The space that I've been working in is livelihoods, entrepreneurship, women-led development, a lot in marginalized areas.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Girija Srinivasan. I'm a consultant now. Earlier, I was working with NABARD. And currently, I am working in 5 different countries with almost 7 projects which are implemented by government with funding support from multilateral donors. And enterprise promotion among the women is core in at least 3 or 4 of the projects. And I have had a lot of association with women's self-help group movement, and also thanks to Vipin, this year we have published on 30 years of SHG movement, and looking forward to this discussion, which is really important. Vipin.
Hi, morning everyone. I'm Kanika from Development Alternatives. I lead the work of green and inclusive entrepreneurship, where we have a very deep commitment towards looking at the gaps that exist in the system with respect to women entrepreneurship. So we're exploring many ways to enable mobility, for women entrepreneurship to get unlocked. We're looking at finance, we're looking at removing patriarchal social barriers. There's a very deep interest now in also looking at how the women cluster level federations can take ownership of women entrepreneurship. And along with, of course, many examples that we're seeing now to scale job creation through women enterprises. So I think that's something of deep interest to us. So this is a great network to be part of.
Hello, my name is Kundan and I'm representing Center for Advocacy and Research. We are working across gender basically and particularly women. And presently we are working in Delhi and Calcutta on this social inclusion project. And this includes the livelihood as well. So we have also worked with the government institution like NULM, and we have formed the area level federation also, and we are seeking to scale up the livelihood opportunities and through the networks like this. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Deepak. I'm also with the CFAR from CFAR.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Devika, and I am currently a third year student at Kamala Nehru College, Delhi University. And today we are here to report the event as part of the interns at Access Development Services. Thank you for this opportunity.
I'm Riddhi, and yeah, we are together.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Harsha Chaudhary, and recently I have joined Access Development Services as a senior project coordinator in the gender vertical. And I'm looking forward to this discussion, and hopefully, it will lead to something concrete. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yamani Atmavilas. I represent the Udayati Foundation. It's a new foundation focused entirely on women's economic empowerment, and our focus is on three prongs. Improving women's access to quality jobs, increasing the access to low-cost credit for informal women's businesses, and I think just promoting enterprise, solid and high-quality enterprise growth. And the third area is what we call the accelerator in terms of we enablers. I think this whole piece around norms, mobility, safety, care, support, that's a cross-cut for us. And we work both with private sector, with financial institutions, as well as with public sector government. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Aarti Mohan, co-founder and partner at Sattva, and I lead the gender work that we do at Sattva. We're an impact consulting firm that supports the work across, the global south with a lot more in Southeast Asia and Africa. With women and gender are on one hand, we support the ecosystem building through a lot of our contributions in data knowledge and being able to forge that dialogue and convert to action. And on the other hand, working to support in designing and demonstrating models. Specifically, our interest is looking at gender integration in mainstream big business value chains with business growth and development for women enterprises, and also supporting around supply diversity and other such, and what does it take to really do that holistically. We work with particularly the intersection of government, private sector, and the philanthropic ecosystem to be able to achieve this. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Smita Premchandar. I've been introduced. I would also like to add that I teach 2 courses at the Indian Institute of Management. I teach the course on microfinance every year and a course on gender and development policies, which I have introduced like 5 years ago. So I am really excited because I hope some of you sometime will come to my classes as well and visit IAMA. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shabnam Durrani, and along with Kanika Verma, I'm actually leading the knowledge, learning, and communication for the green and inclusive entrepreneurship for DA. And it basically helps us, the whole knowledge and learning, the investment that we've made to sort of helps in the adaptive management of the program, especially the women's entrepreneurship program within DA. Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vaishali. I'm work with the UN Women India on care economy. Looking forward to the discussion.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Suhaila Khan, and I lead the work on women's economic empowerment at UN Women in India. Our focus on women's economic empowerment is on women's entrepreneurship and employment, and we work with private sector, government, civil society, industry associations. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gitika. I'm a senior gender specialist consultant with the Central Asia World Bank. Moved from India, so but very excited to be here because we tried something similar in Vipin, Suhaila, some of you were part of this. So very happy to share some of those experiences and what this really network could do. At the World Bank, of course, we've seen a lot of transformation now from gender or women's empowerment or women's economic empowerment being one of the things that we wanted to pilot, try, innovate, to really it being one of the core things that we are pushing through our projects. So no matter which project, which sector we work in or we have projects on, this is one component that we've really started pushing for women's economic empowerment. And so I'm glad to be here. Look forward.
Hi everyone, good morning. I'm Madhu Sharan from Hand in Hand India, the president of Hand in Hand India. So Hand in Hand, I think it's a large NGO. We work with women's empowerment, livelihoods and community development across 17 states and 10 countries across the globe. We are primarily into livelihoods, and I think a lot of you here, we've been working together. But promoting women's empowerment through job creation is the core focus area of Hand in Hand. Till date, in the last 20 years, we've created about 8.6 million jobs for the rural poor across farm, non-farm, energy-based, family, household-based, group-based enterprises. And happy to share our experiences at this platform. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I am Arpana. I am representing Digital Empowerment Foundation. I am part of their MC as well as I am leading the program division of DF. So the problem identified by DF on which we work is the dearth of timely and relevant information at the last mile community level. So to address that, what we have done, we create a small nano micro digital centers across India in the in the far-flung areas of India, and we have our presence in 24 states. Currently we have such 2,000 such centers, and 60% of those centers, almost 60% of those centers are run by women on a social entrepreneurship model. Yeah, so happy to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Good morning. I am Chinmay. I am from Saath Charitable Trust, and our focus is on livelihood, micro-entrepreneurship, health and education. We have promoted cooperative societies, and we also support grassroots CBOs and institutions for the livelihood and micro-entrepreneurship.
Good morning. I'm Chetna Galasina, founder Mandeshi Mahila Cooperative Bank and Mandeshi Foundation. I'm very delighted to share that we'll be impacting 1 million women entrepreneurs this year. So we'll be celebrating that. Mandeshi is operating in 19 locations in 3 states. And Vipin, I would say that, whatever you have shared, it's and your background with SIDBI and so I do think that a lot of public goods are required for women, which otherwise for other men in mainstream it is there. So, and for that alliance is very important. So let's see how we can create those public goods like pre-credit score for women. Without collateral, what can we do? Otherwise, we won't be able to address the scale. And unless also I would like to say that how do we de-risk the lender while doing financing to women? That would be very important.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shubhangi. I'm working in Sampark. Sampark is based in Bangalore, but we have a rural branch at Koppal and Varanasi. I'm basically working in Varanasi. So we work for the social economic development of the women, RSHG women, and basically my role is to for women livelihood development. Also, for the same, we have got a Kashika stall right in the basement. I would request everyone to have a look. We have like handmade masalas, like spices and pickles made by our women. Thank you.
Hello everyone, good morning and very sorry that I got so late. I'm Shona Mitra from iWage, and I am the head of policy and research at iWage.
And hello, everyone. I'm Meenakshi Rathore. I lead the gender vertical at Axis. And in that capacity, I also handle the Udyam Mahila program, which is a campaign styled program looking at how do we push the envelope for greater participation of women in the economy, and how do we sort of build that kind of policy support for the government by working in alignment with the government and their priorities. And very happy to see all of you here once again. Thank you so much. And I will now pass it on to Smita to carry forward the discussion. Thank you so much.
I'm hearing already that all of us are very, very excited about the idea of the network. So this is a tick that is not needed later, probably it's already there. So, and also because all of you are here, I'm really excited and I'm really grateful to be here to listen to all of us and our experiences and how we shape this initiative together. May I just ask us to start once with a round of applause for all of us. So this is wonderful. We have structured the questions that we need to debate, and I thought about it earlier whether we should actually be breaking into groups and talking, and in which case we would draw much more out. But on balance, I feel that there's so much richness, and if we keep our interventions short and to the point, then maybe everybody can benefit just by being in a plenary together for 2 hours. Does that sound okay to you? Okay, so what we'll do then, I'll just start with a very brief overview about women's entrepreneurship in India, to which I'm sure you can add a lot of information as well. So may I request again that on your sheets of paper, can you keep making notes that you might want to just give to the organizers before we leave, so that if you have ideas, let's say about why a network, or what are the problems, or what are the challenges, or whatever thoughts are occurring to you as we talk in the next 10-15 minutes, that would be great. And then we will structure also, you can speak to them and also hand over the notes to Meenakshi. So I think women's entrepreneurship in India, we know there is a business case. So I am actually quite a strong proponent of the idea that women's entrepreneurship does not need to be shown as a business case. It is a human rights case by itself. You need to have women's entrepreneurship, and you don't need a business case. But we are living in the neoliberal world, and everything needs a business case. So I think the UN, SDGs, all these offices are always talking about why, right? So to be able to convince private sector and donors and so on, we do know. What are you doing? I'll do that. Thank you. Yeah. Okay. So basically, we have research to show that if there is women's entrepreneurship and women's incomes increase, then poverty does decrease, there is improved economic productivity, and there is, of course, greater economic growth. There are some calculations to show that GDP of India will go up by at least 27% if we start counting, never mind entrepreneurship, but even if we just start counting unpaid care work of women at home. So obviously entrepreneurship will also add. So we know that 48.4% of India's population is women. Women's contribution to GDP in India is 18%. The world average is 37%, and the world average is not even a benchmark, even that is low. So female labor force participation rate is 37% as of last year. Global gender gap, India ranks 143 out of 149. And for those of you who are actually looking at gender gaps, we know that across the world, it will now take us 236 years over the world to close the gender gap. So it used to be less. It used to be 146 or some years, and then COVID set it back. The latest reports say that the COVID gap has been covered, but still it's at least 180 years before we achieve equality. What is that, right? So we really need to work very hard together. India ranks 70th among 77 countries on Female Entrepreneurship Index. That's Niti Aayog already recognizing that. Index of Women Entrepreneurs, which MasterCard has done, is India is 57 out of the 67 countries that they looked at. And women constitute 14% of India's entrepreneurs, of which 98% are micro businesses and 95% are in the informal, unorganized sector. Only 10% of women have agricultural land ownership, and those of us who work on the ground, we know that even though there are inheritance laws and women can inherit money, but agricultural land states don't allow. They just call the brother and the sister and they tell the sister to pass it on, because in their minds land fragmentation is a bigger issue than the gender issue, right? So the woman is asked to give up. So we have all these cultural things, patriarchy coming in. 90% of women entrepreneurs have not borrowed from a financial institution. So we know this. Access and Sampark team, we did a study 2 years ago for the World Bank, for the World Bank, and on formal financial institutions. And at that time, Access was saying, we know about the demand side much more. Let's at least go and find out what about the formal financial institutions, what are their challenges, what are their perspectives, do they want to loan to women, and what are they going to do? Do they even track it? Do they track it? What are they trying to do? Where are their constraints? Let's look at it from the supply side. So I think what you were also saying just before we started, some of you were talking, and that, with SHGs, there has been huge growth. With SHGs, 308,000 crores now, or no, that's the microfinance figure, 120 or so, 180,000 crores, right? Something like that for SHGs. It's less than the yeah. Yeah. But since NRLM came in, they claim that there has been more than 120 lakh crores. Yeah. So and about 80%, 86% of those groups are women's groups, right? So more than that. Okay. And now, as per latest figures, 85% of the groups are in the NRLM fold now. Right. Okay. So basically what's happening is that though SHGs are getting a lot of money, and largely because of the support of the NRLM program, which has got, which is hugely governmentalized these groups, so NGOs are by and large eradicated. But at the same time, there have been advantages of that governmentalization, because there's been thousands of crores of rupees gone into SHGs through NRLM. So there have been advantages, but there is a huge gap between SHG and individual loans. So NBFCs, which can give 15% of their funding to individual entrepreneurs are able to go to the IL, the individual loan, but by and large, most banks are really reluctant because these are different streams, and they're okay to give money to SHGs, which they give because of support and track record of SHGs, 97% repayments, all and so on. But this schism between the group lending and the individual lending still remains very strong. So, thank you. Okay, so one thing was that only women's organizations believe that a gender sensitive approach is needed. We talked about the approach, and only others said no. I mean, they were either what we call gender neutral is actually gender blind, right? So basically, they said no, women don't need it. Don't need a different approach. Yeah. To financing. Gender disaggregated data, it's either not maintained, which I actually don't understand this. Maybe some of you understand it better, that when you see RBI statistics or so, you know that they have to report, because from somewhere we are getting the figure of 21 or 24% credit of banks going to women, right? That figure is coming. How is that coming? But when we speak to individual financial institutions, they say we don't actually analyze this data. Yeah, and nobody provided us the data. 21 organizations we spoke to. Nobody provided us gender segregated data. Outreach costs are perceived to be higher for women. So again, they feel that women need more awareness, you need more staff costs, etc. Those are barriers in their minds. And of course, new women inclusive products are needed, which many of you also, some of you we interviewed during the study, Chetna and Girija as well, I think. Okay, so basically, there was huge agreement that non-financial services are needed. And but who should provide them? So the bank said, this is not our job. You bring a woman entrepreneur's proposal to the table that is financeable, that is credit worthy, and we will give it, and we don't look at whether the proposal is coming from a man or a woman. So the job of bringing that proposal, that has to be done by an NGO, not by a financial institution, right? These are very clear messages that came. Risk perception, women are perceived as very good repayers. SHGs have established that. Does it translate into giving more loans to individual women entrepreneurs? No. Women and gender sensitive staff, as well as senior management, these create greater outreach to women customers. This was again very, very clear. Small finance banks, which had gone from NBFCs to becoming small finance banks, were much more sensitive than universal banks, and and very keen on actually having their staff trained, and also putting more women at the senior level and field staff. Upstream and downstream linkages, especially market linkages, are needed, and private sector banks find it very difficult to access government schemes, right? Other than, whatever is under priority sector and automatic refinance and so on, they don't access any other schemes. So these kind of findings, basically we started realizing that time itself, and of course many of us know even from before, that it is important to promote a multi-stakeholder platform, to have a multi-stakeholder platform to talk about these issues, to push policy, to push institutions, not only lending institutions, but how do you do value chains, how do you promote markets for women, how do you integrate them better into markets. For all these reasons, a multi-stakeholder platform is really important. I will stop here because I really want to pose these questions. What do you think from your point of view and from your organization's experiences would be some of the key benefits of such a, so we all in the morning agreed that this should happen, but what would you think would be the key benefits or should be the key objectives? So let me stop here and let's debate this question for a bit. Meenakshi, may I request you to just note the order of hands and thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Smita. That's a very good overview which you have put together. I would rate the policy work to be done as the most important one, primarily because we don't even have a definition of the nano enterprises in the government scheme of things now. The micro enterprises, 1 crore and above, and so women are all in the lowest spectrum of enterprises. So when any scheme comes in for micro enterprises, it is the larger ones in the micro enterprise segment which will really corner. So we need to have a very clear definition of nano enterprises. This is very, very important. The second is we don't even have, I think, a definition of what is women owned. And that is also important, because when we talk to bankers, they say, oh, women are part of the family business, so why should we finance a woman? But that is true. She is part of a family business. But then if she is the one which is an equal partner or more than an equal partner, then the financing becomes very, very critical. So I think what is a woman-owned enterprise also requires, we have to start from that level of this thing. And then I think we were talking with Chetna ji, the whole access to finance is a major one. Smita also mentioned 90% of the women self-finance. So how do we really enable appropriate instruments? Because it is not only credit which is important, but also, some amount of blended finance where government comes up with many schemes. But how do we really ensure that they reach women? So there should be a very good blended finance available where we can really. So I'm just giving examples, but not getting into details. But, it's not the cookie cutter approach. Okay, we want to give only one type of credit from the institutions, and guarantee window for women. That is very important. And I think the whole access to finance is a major, major obstacle where we require more work together as a network. And the fourth area is, what we see as many women are constrained in a way because they have to do so much of unpaid care work at home, and there is not recognition even within families of the entrepreneurial ability. No, I'm not sure what we could do as a network together, but the earlier we recognize this, because you talk to many number of women, they say the family support is what has set me down vis-a-vis another one in my neighborhood who has gone up. So the counseling aspect we need to really bring in whichever interventions we do. Somehow the government policy and others do not recognize this aspect very well. There is, of course, TA and others. I'll stop here, giving opportunity for others. For me, the primary one is the policy.
Yeah. Next is Suhaila.
Sorry. No, thank you. And I completely agree with you, Girja, on the policy aspect of the things. I also wanted to say that, what we also need is the gender analysis of the data. So, of course, there is, a sex disaggregated data that we found in bits and pieces around for men's access and women's access, but what we need is the clear-cut gender analysis, that what are really the challenges and barriers. That is number one, for us to be able to inform the policies. Now, when we look at women's entrepreneurship, I see three major buckets. I mean, of course, access to finance is critical, but access to markets is equally important, and the capacity building, mentorship, networking. I think these three buckets, if we could look at. The interventions, we need to see that how we are through this through this network are able to create those opportunities and capacities to address all of this. But what I would also like to say is the fact that in order for us to move the needle, we need to have government on the table as well. We need to have financial institutions on the table as well, and we need to have private sector on the table as well. Then, in terms of our strategies, then we should be gearing towards the coalition's acceptance by the government also as a credible sort of a voice of the civil society, of multiple organizations that are able to push the agenda. So I think objectives, from the objectives perspective, yes, of course, we are looking at 3 buckets, but also strategy wise, who should be there on the table. So let me take a pause here, and I'll be happy to contribute as we progress. Thank you.
Can I just interject 1 minute before we start? So Ella, thank you for that. But I would say let's look at who should be members of the association, and then let's look at who should be the stakeholders that we need to influence. So maybe government and formal financial institutions are target group that one needs to influence, or do we want them around it? I'm just leaving it as an open question. I think we need to debate it as we go along, but just opening a question. Meenakshi, who goes next?
Hi, Kanika, do you want to?
Thanks for sharing the data as well. And I think the first and foremost thought that I had was, you mentioned that we need to make a case. We're living in liberty. I think this network, because otherwise we will have a lot of networks doing a similar thing. But I think the question is, are we really willing to flip the question around women's entrepreneurship? And if so, then instead of focusing where a lot of organizations, a lot of networks focus on the challenges, are we willing to focus on the strengths and say, okay, how do we even call out the fact that a lot of the problems exist because we are not willing to call out that we're not giving this enough importance, that there is too much focus on other things. And whether it's connectivity, mobility, other things, how do we sort of focus on that and bring the data out and share the knowledge? I think there's fantastic work being done, but I don't know if we know enough about the knowledge that's being generated. So how do we sort of share more? I think the second thought that was coming to my mind was that how do we sort of one of the objectives has to be on the definitions. I think you sort of mentioned it as well. Aspirations are changing so much. There is a lot of scope. Women want something different now, but do we even really deeply understand that? And how do we have a sort of a deep listening process among the network to be able to do that, so that we're also always evolving, and we don't come to the table thinking, oh, we know everything already. The third thing, again, I think in terms of policy, I just want to reiterate that point about the fact that the policy work has to be a very, very important aspect of how the network moves forward, because I think that's where we have to influence the most. There is no policy for micro entrepreneurship. The definitions don't make sense anymore. There's a huge amount, the amount of women that are in the informality, where the aspirations have changed, we really deeply need to understand that. And at the same time, again, like I'd mentioned, that there's a lot of evidence of women creating the jobs. So how do we help women create the enterprises that can lead to job creation and actually solve a major challenge that exists, will be something that we could look at.
Thank you, Kanika. Very important points. Over to Geetika now.
So a lot has been covered, which I wanted to say, but one of the things which you started to say was, for us as this network, when we're envisaging what it would be, what could be the objectives, all of the work that you've said comes in, let's say, even Suhaila was saying 3 buckets, but what I want to say is each of those players will be important to rope in. So firstly, all of us who work on preparing women for entrepreneurship, which means capacity building, the mentors, building their agency, those kind of players. Then there are players who work on policy influencing, removing structural institutional barriers, those players. But there are also players who work around social and normative changes. We know that communities also have barriers. Women face so many constraints within the family, taunts, mostly discouraging them to look at this, which makes them risk averse. So these three components, we should see all those players are there. Then everybody's talking about policy, but how will we influence policy? What is the way this network will unpack and begin to influence policy? So is it going to be through more such informative sessions with government stakeholders? Like you were saying, Smita, there are people who we want as members and there are people who we want to influence because the barriers may be coming from there. So I think the methodology and how we're going to influence people is most important. What we had tried in the World Bank was, our aim when we tried to do a similar network was to do several roundtables, take them at the state level as well. So there are states which may be really including this as an area they want to work on. So can we have strategic roundtables at the state level, not just confine ourselves to Delhi? So if it's, let's say, Orissa or West Bengal really wanting to push this agenda, we go there, we look at state level issues, barriers, good practices. I just took a glance at some of your other questions. So if some of that work can be done, we just need to think through, what do we mean by influencing policies? Are we going to come up with policy briefs as a group? Are we going to have these strategic dialogues, stakeholder level? So basically, some of those things we may need to think through
as you speak. I'm thinking of the ILO methodology of tripartite partners and thinking we should look at something like that, right? What Suhela was also talking about. So bring the government, the employers and the workers together, and that's how ILO works. So maybe we form some, conceptualize something like this: private sector, government, maybe some market players, we need to conceptualize that. I think that would be a really exciting exercise in the next meeting or another meeting, that we go deep into conceptualization of whose voice to be reached to whom. So if we're creating voice, influence and agency and influencing norms and institutions, then who are these people and how do we do it? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Smita, thanks for bringing the economic lens there in your first slide, because that's was my primary point, adding to what Suhela is doing, to say that as a coalition, can we look at how do we demonstrate market access in a scalable way? Today, there are several, from a big business, corporate standpoint, we're looking at various ways, like supplier diversity, inclusion in value chains, gender integration at an individual enterprise level, private source procurement, and so on. They're all, if at best, small explorations, and they don't scale, and for various reasons, because you don't start working from the beginning of the pipeline and develop that pipeline to be able to then service tomorrow, 50 crores or whatever in terms of your product or service and so on. Just take an example, right? And corporates do not even know how to work at a scale below that. So, and that's something that one organization can never do. So can we look primarily at a way for all of us to come together to, then demonstrate what it takes to build that pipeline and then scale, because then in those numbers we can scale. So that's my first point. Second is, I'd love to, multiple points came up on, just for me, that how do we build a shared vocabulary around, what is the Indian definition of women enterprise and that continuum? Because they unorganized, organized, informed, and for each, when we talk about that, for each person in the room, it means different things from their experience, right? So we're actually doing something in the afternoon in terms of evidence, and we're saying, can we cross the chasm of first definition, right? And so as a network, if we can build shared vocabulary around the Indian definition of women enterprises, that'd be like an awesome thing to then, for us to then, whether it's policy and suggesting nano enterprise, or whether it's working with the private sector, etc. The third thing is, in terms of what the, I mean, it's intuitively, it would bring down the cost of both creation and distribution of public goods. So to what Chetna ji said, as a network, we can really be efficient in coming together with our expertise to create an
I had one point on the structure of the network and so on itself, because from an alliance which is so loosely put together, like a Catalyst 2030, right? Like they meet and then they break with, to a very intentional, like an ARC which works on sexual and reproductive health in India. It's 150 organizations, super intense, but that comes together because of that structure. And there are so many structures in the middle. What structure? It'd be great to think about what structure might be helpful for a network to come together, because collaborations are hard to build, but they're much harder to sustain, because all of us have limited mindshare resources and so on in all the work that we do. So what's the incentive to keep coming again to contribute in a larger setting, other than the logic that of course all of us believe that it has to be done? So that's my, in terms of just structure, to look at what are the options that might allow us to both contribute in a more intentional way, but also balance it with what might be our other priorities, and therefore then what is that central structure that facilitates that space better. Thanks.
Thank you. I just respond very quickly to say that I'm really thinking the way we are shaping this, I think we're shaping it very high and ambitious, which is really great, because all the current networks that we know, and there are so many that we already know, right? At the state level, there are the women entrepreneurs associations. We have Awake in Karnataka. We have similar one in Andhra Pradesh. So many state level women entrepreneurs organizations are there. And there are so many like Shiros and IWN, and various agencies have set up various networks of women entrepreneurs. We are thinking, I think, at a little bit of a meta level, right? And we're thinking how to bring all these threads together. So we will have to work through the structure. We will also have to work through collecting who are the entrepreneur organizations already existing. How do we bring their voices and their experiences into consideration, and them as actors also in the kind of network that we create? Yeah, so thank you for bringing this up. Can I? Is that okay? It's okay. Sorry, Chetna ji, and then yeah.
I would just go to little bit in history, like with other network, what has happened.
So
Huh?
give me a minute. I'm going to now, since we've opened all the questions, I'm going to put this whole set of questions here, and I'm going to stop writing and just listen. So we were looking at 4 questions. One is, what would be the objectives and benefits of the network that we've opened up? But many of you are already talking about, and which organizations do you suggest as members? Again, you've started opening up on that. But I think also good practices and the challenges. So that's where you are opening, Chitnaji.
No, actually, I'm saying something before, like, I'm just like trying to say that when I was listening to everyone, I was just, and as when in the beginning Vipin mentioned about care and microfinance and all. So I just want us that one is to create these alliances, or what we said that, what type loose collaboration. Even before that, I was just thinking, like, when Nachiket Moore committee report came in financial sector, it actually, and why did it come? Because it was such a strong business case of microcredit, which was indicating that something very critical has to be done in financial sector, which will affect the regulator and mainstream banking, right? And then this small finance bank, payment bank, everything came up. So I am actually thinking that, can we think and take us towards, instead, I mean, I know very valuable inputs have come, but can this alliance think in that way that, okay, we want to set up, bring a white paper or report, and which will be head or chaired by, say, deputy governor like Shamla Gopinath or somebody, where we want, and some, of course, alliance will do that, but will come with some basic things that will actually change the whole, transform this whole game, like which will bring the market aspect, as Suhela mentioned, or which will bring the capacity building, or which will bring the concrete suggestions in banking sector. Without collateral loans also, there is a
confidence in lender because there is credit guarantee scheme. So I'm not suggesting anyone, but what I'm suggesting is that for this, if we want women entrepreneurs to be considered into mainstream sector, either it is in banking or in marketing, something like this if comes, I don't know, Vipin, how would you why I'm saying Vipin is also one of the reason that a lot of us have witnessed that how Nachiket More committee report came, and after that all these debates of SFBs, payment banks started. So can we do something like that? And already some things are going on. ONDC is there where women entrepreneurs are there, and banks have also come forward. I'm just saying that with ONDC I saw that banks were coming forward that we want to lend to women entrepreneurs, we are onboarding on ONDC. But my concern is that if something starts with the government, that is great, but we know what happened to Mahila Bank, right? Rashtriya Mahila Bank. So I just feel that whatever we think, it has to have that potential, and we may need something like white paper chaired by some reputed person, and bring some very strong, solid suggestions to financial sector, to policymaker, and to mainstream banking. I mean, with the regulator and the mainstream. So we can think of some big players like MasterCard or others, HSBC. I mean, those who are interested in these broad.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
मैं ये कहना चाह रही थी कि बहुत मतलब ये बहुत बड़ा माइक्रो एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप नैनो ये यूज़ कर सकते हैं। हाँ, हमें एज अ नेटवर्क हमें बहुत क्लियर बताना पड़ेगा, हाँ बताना पड़ेगा कि हम किसके लिए बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि शायद 100, 200, 500 लोग अलग अलग टाइप के कैटेगरीज होंगे माइक्रो नैनो एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप की। तो हमें वो एक बार डिफाइन करना पड़ेगा कि कौन से कैटेगरी के लिए क्या हम बात कर रहे हैं, क्या हम एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे हैं कि उनको क्या चाहिए। तो वो एक बार डिटेल आउट करना चाहिए, और 3-4 चीज़ें हैं स्पेसिफिक, हम क्या नेटवर्क के रूप से मांगते हैं, क्या कहना चाहते हैं जो हमें चाहिए पॉलिसी से, या फिर जो प्लेयर्स हैं दूसरे उनसे, या फिर पार्टनरशिप के थ्रू। अगर वो क्लियर होगा तो हम लोगों को इनिशियल लेवल पे वो जो सक्सेस चाहिए वो मिलेगा, तो देन वी कैन सस्टेन द नेटवर्क। थैंक यू।
yeah, so I think lots of things actually, Smita, but I would actually begin with the fact that something similar to what Chetna ji has said, ki we are a lot of grassroots organizations over here, and we have to show something which is demonstrable to go see what is policy. So we should not be too critical of the government, because if we give a good solid business plan to the government is very keen to promote lending for micro enterprises, whether women or men, whichever makes a strong business case. So I think we should start with the state level. So if we can have, because there are some very, very keen government people at the state who are very keen to promote micro entrepreneurship among women. They are looking for good CSOs, corporates, who can come up with some strong business strategies. So I think we should access should actually think of working. I mean, you have bodies in Odisha, Rajasthan, all of us. Yeah, so of course, like for example, what I was telling yesterday, so we work in 17 states. So Tamil Nadu, we are working with entrepreneurs who are all accessing formal financial institutions. We just celebrated 200 women entrepreneurs whose annual turnover was 25 lakhs and more. But that will not work in, say, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh. So some state governments are very, very proactive. I think we should make a strong business case starting from the state level. Second, I want to say that the government is not keen to have many NGOs, but we know what we bring to the table. So I think we should really overemphasize our contribution in terms of, because when we're talking of about gender, we cannot neglect the non-financial aspects of a women's contribution. So when I work in Bihar and Jharkhand, I look at health first, education first, and then I come to livelihoods. I do not start with micro entrepreneurship at all. In Punjab, I start with micro entrepreneurship because women are very comfortable in their nutrition and education level. So I think we have to think of breaking this. Breaking means not the group, but breaking the strategies into what exactly we want from this network, and focus small but strategic, and then approach the policy. Because I also work very closely with the government. I mean, hand in hand works very closely with the government, and we know that they are also keen to promote micro entrepreneurs because they also have a target. So unless and until we start with very strategic outputs and show demonstrable results, so I think that is very key. And the third that I want to say is that there are, like what I was telling yesterday, there are lots of policies. SIDBI has a range of products, Niti Aayog has a portal, MSME. This forum, if we can actually get and collate some of the important financial products for women and make it accessible to them and then show the results, that would help. And the last I want to say is that somewhere down the line, we need to have a graduation of women entrepreneurs, because this is a very, very, very big area. And women's needs, their capacities, what they aspire, that has to be tapped and shown to the government. So we are talking about policy all the time, but we have to do a lot of work prior to the policy, so that everybody wants a good business proposal. We have to give them that. So what we, like I said, we work with 4.2 million women, 4,50,000 SHGs. Every SHG has different categories. So you categorize their wants, and then you give specific demand driven this thing, work with the supply chain. And the last is, I think, market linkage. Of course, I will stop at this.
Thank you, Madhu. I think we are getting more and more, opening up more and more chapters here. I would say you are talking about visibility, credibility. Those go with structures, but those go also with what issues we'll pick up and so on. I think the agenda is opening up quite a lot, and the word that we are all looking at as the operative word is transformative. So to be able to move from gender blind or gender neutral or gender sensitive, even gender aware, that doesn't satisfy us. We actually are looking at serious transformation, whether it's at the grassroots level, what kind of businesses to promote, how to see women graduate, or at the policy level, or at the the financial products or the market level. I will not try to summarize everything today. It's very important for us to listen, but I would really invite some of you to talk about, so Madhu has already talked about some good practices, but if some of you want to share what the challenges of some networks are, and how we can make sure that we don't fall into those pitfalls.
Kundan wants to go first.
Okay, Kundan.
Yes. Hello. Hello. I think I'm audible. I think some of you have really shared your experiences, and I will agree. जो आपने भी बोला था. See, we have done the on livelihood. We are on the grassroots. We are working basically not a very at that level, but I will share some of the good practices what we are doing at a small, like in Calcutta and even in fact in Delhi. So we have built this network platform, multi-stakeholder platform with network partner also, and with the government institution also. And in Calcutta also, like it was a convergence model we developed with the food and safety department, FSSAI, and the NULM also, and it was with the ULBs led basically. सो कहीं ना कहीं मुझे लग रहा है कि जो इंस्टीट्यूशन है एट द पॉलिसी लेवल, यू नीड ऑफ कोर्स द इंस्टीट्यूशन लाइक जो पॉलिसी पे काम कर रहे हैं एंड ग्रास रूट ऑल्सो. So at the convergence model, what we have done is that women, so many women actually, SHGs, they try to start this, small this thing. So, but many this official procedures, norms, the challenges we faced, like certification from the food and safety, these things about, because they started the fast food items, like and many of them are doing the home delivery work also, for the food items. So they are getting the orders also, but as a collective work, as a livelihood. But still there are challenges at individual level, as you know. लोग सब लोग काम कर रहे हैं. Many women are working, but as a collective level, there are lots of challenges, and I think this kind of platform can really help, where really they can push the agenda to the at policy level, because even the government now is focusing on these microfinance enterprises through NULM and RLM. But what we observe that even at the government institution, there are limited people who are keen to do that, and even the other institution like banks also, sometimes the banks official who are dealing with the issues, they don't know why they, they want to initiate this livelihood process, opening the bank account, small thing. एंड आई थिंक वन ऑफ द दिस यहाँ पर इन्होंने बोला था कि दिस नेटवर्क जो ऑनलाइन नेटवर्क का है, लाइक ONDC, एंड आई थिंक गवर्नमेंट इज ट्राइंग टू डू दिस जेम ई मार्केट जो ये है. So but women do not have access with that. It's not easy access, though the NULM and other institution, they are trying to link up with this online platform, but still there are do not have the GST, or no access with how to register themselves with that whole hand holding is really every time you require. But at the policy level, because as a microfinance entrepreneurship, to scale up that, you need this kind of platform and a multi-stakeholder this thing.
Thank you. I actually have a query, not really a comment, because what I wanted to ask was that we are building a network here, and we are also talking about similar networks existing. What is a mechanism of bringing together the networks? It is not only about the similar networks. In fact, yesterday I was at the launch of a network on economic policy for women-led development at ICRIAR, and they were also doing very similar things. Nobody spoke of entrepreneurship in particular, but we were all talking about influencing the government on these policies. Why don't we think of a mechanism of bringing some representations of similar networks into this network, so that we converge on certain things that we intend to do? So that is one of the things that I wanted to highlight. And the second thing that I wanted to highlight was a very particular specific thing on influencing the government. A very specific point, which is I'm also very passionate about, is data. We have to influence the government on many things, but I think data on women entrepreneurship is something that we really need to work hard to speak to the government, especially the MOSPI, who's been doing a great job till 2014 in collecting regular data on women's entrepreneurship, and that has been stopped. So these are things that we need to, I just wanted to highlight these two things that the network can do.
Thank you. Who's next, Meenakshi?
Next one to go is Yamini.
There are monitor.
4 hands on this side also. Okay, and then Shubhangi and Prema.
Hard to add, but two quick things from my side. One is, you asked about challenges of running networks or sustaining networks. I think we all can get into many examples. I can speak about an example in a formal life when I was a donor. Again, tried to build livelihoods organizations network, right? And I think that's the gap also that I see, that a lot of the entrepreneurship space is different. It's not necessarily grassroots livelihoods organizations.
specific. It may include them, but it's not specific to them. So potentially, I think that is a really strong need that's emerging. And but even there's so much diversity. But having sort of tried to do that, I think the big challenge is resourcing. Second is rotational leadership. How do you keep it moving? Who runs it? Who owns it? Where does the money go? Who has decision making? Who's doing the legwork? Like a lot of that, just the mechanics and the operational parts of it, and making sure that there is a participatory nature to it, but at the same time no one drops the ball, and then it usually becomes a couple of orgs running. I think everyone's smiling because everyone has gone through this experience. Then I think Madhu, you talked about the state variation. I think that became a huge but I think building it into the design was the flaw. Not building it into the design was a flaw in the initial thinking. But I think as you think of regional or even state level chapters, prioritization and just having again that balance between having a tight structure because you want a Nachiket more committee type of report, or a big bang sort of identity and a unified voice, but at the same time having that diversity of voices, diversity of agendas sort of being defined and led by partners, right? I think that is it's really tough, but it can be done. But I think it was a big learning. The last I'll say is, I can't read my handwriting. What did I write here? Something else. Anyway, but I think those were maybe the 3 or 4 big ones. But I'll just having said that, I'll add 2 things just in terms of, I think, the objectives, because I think landing the objectives is really critical. And I don't have the answer, but I think maybe my contribution is picking up from some of these, right? I do think that there is a need to be forward looking right now, and the DPIs, there is a world that is leaving behind a lot of the women we care about, most of the women we care about, and a lot of different kinds of intermediary organizations are filling that space, right? And that spectrum of organizations is something that, while yes, we should have them all at the table, or at least understand who they are and understand that landscape and really get a hold on it, not just donors and I think there's a lot of focus on policy, but there is donors, there's a whole diversity of groups around donors, and donor agendas often define this space, and not just the timeline as Vipin mentioned, but absolutely, like, how do you go beyond that sort of mandate? But I think also these kinds of different support organizations that have cropped up in the space, right? And many are non-profit, for-profit, and I think those tend to sort of become intermediaries, and therefore the ultimate sort of even the impacts and the outcomes we want may not necessarily be very clear. So I think getting ahead of that and helping organizations and this network sort of staying on top of that, for me, is a really, really big agenda. And the second, I think, is this financial institutions piece. It's a new space for me, but definitely having worked with Nachiket more on public health some years ago, I think he always talked about this whole question of provider bias in public health. And so I think similarly, I was speaking to someone the other day very excitedly after, I think, a conversation with Chetna, and said, oh, it's so interesting, like maybe we should just sit down with a loan officer and sort of see how they make decisions. And I think for most of the world is a very strange thing, preoccupation, that we get excited about trying to understand the behavior of that particular loan officer at that desk, and then moving back up to the behavior of financial institutions. I think the financial institutions piece is really, really critical, and I'll agree with everything that Girija talked about. I think the policy first is a really critical one, but I think the how has to be an art in this current context to make sure that we get the gains we get, but also don't lose some of the things that do exist.
I'm aware that Meenakshi is monitoring the order, but I have a request now, since we decided to close by 11:30, but we can go a little bit forward. It's okay till 12, but I would still request everybody to just keep their interventions a little bit shorter. Yeah? Who's next, Meenakshi? Girija?
Anybody who has not spoken, please give that chance.
I can add to the challenges bit to what
Okay. Smita, very, very pertinent questions, particularly on the challenges and also, the good practices. We do have some very good global examples of not working. For example, the Microcredit Summit, which was really glorious, is not there anymore. Similarly, SEEP network, which was more member owned and member driven, that is not there anymore, right? So we should really learn from some of these experiences which were really very widely owned and this thing. So coming to that, I think we should have clarity whether we would like this network to have a long-term agenda, or are we going to look at a very specific time frame and with core purpose of something like, you know, what Chetna ji has mentioned, take that up and then see, you know, what. So it all depends on, you know, the financing, which I think Yamini mentioned. How do we secure finance for this? Whether it will be member contribution or, you know, it has to be donor funded, and the whole aspect of financing becomes very, very crucial when we talk of a network. Smita, what you mentioned about, you know, so many networks already there and, you know, at state level. And so I think we need to be realistic that this will not be the only one. This cannot be the only one. But what is that space which we are really looking at? And maybe we start with some of the core partners in this, and then let us see how we really include more, or, you know, network of networks somebody was mentioning. But that's all big agenda. So look at now some like-minded larger players come together to really take the this thing. I think that is what would work initially, instead of aiming too big. And we also know that, you know, there are different stakeholders, even government, what you were mentioning, they are implementers as well, they are not just policy makers. So where do you include them, right? So we need to be so cautious in how do we bring in the stakeholders and this thing. Only thing is now there is a lot of noise now, particularly around women entrepreneurship. So one has to really move the chaff away and really come to the core of things. That is very, very important. These are all my points for network. I have jotted down quite a few things. I'll pass it on to you, Meenakshi. Thank you. Girija.
The next one to go is Prema. No, very briefly, I think Girija mentioned it. I think we are very clear that we are all on the same page, and maybe we don't need to overstructure at this point, or even structure too much, because I think we know where we all come from, and we are, I think, quite on the same level. I think we have to also know that the political leadership, and when the elections get held, women's votes are very important. So there'll be political leaders and our Prime Minister speaking to the women directly. Our voices are not going to be heard. There are people who are going to be going directly to the women. There's also NRLM, which is totally on the women. You know, so I think we need to know, and I would agree with you, let's pick up a few things which would be game changers and support the political leadership and the government, and not take them in the wrong direction, which they may go, you know, just by just talking and by overdoing things. So let's probably start with a few important things.
Yeah, just wanted to add to the challenges bit, and adding to what Yamini also shared, that one thing is when you set the objective as policy influencing, like how far and how close can you get, so what can be the other agendas of the network, because it can be really disheartening after a point of time if you're not able to influence the policy. And since we all are aware of other networks which are existing on similar issues, can we look at, you know, capacity building session, knowledge sharing, informative sessions, so that we really get an opportunity to come together. And there are actually networks, like I can remember Aman network, which has been functioning for almost 15-16 years now, and it's a non-funded network. So can we reach out to them and ask them to speak to us that how do you sustain a non-funded network over like 15-16 years, what has been their learnings, when we are actually thinking of forming another one. And the other bit, I think, before we set on to the objective mapping and everything, can we also talk about values and principles that this network will be based upon? Because what you shared, Yamini, that shared leadership, inclusivity, diversity, I think that should be like a preamble to the network that we also want to set up. And what you mentioned in the beginning, that women entrepreneurship, it's like a rights issue and not really business. Yeah, so that, just wanted to add that bit. Thanks.
Okay, I'm very naive to this sector, but not talking about the network. I will just talk about that. We talk about the policy, but we tend to have a lot of loopholes in our policy. So one of the loopholes that we talk about, economic empowerment of women. who is being empowered, like in name of women. I've seen so many loans in the name of women taken by their husbands, and like their husband being empowered, and we cannot say that okay, woman is part of that family. No, until and unless the money is not in the hand of the women, I'm sorry, they are not empowered. And lastly, I will be very short. Lastly, when we talk about that ownership of land and women working, and we talk about like women farmers, I have seen and believed also that we tend to make women do work that is very hard to be done, and the easy part are done by the men, like the marketing sector and everything. And what men do, men will easily tell the women that this is not what you can do. This is not what you can do. And that is so easy to influence the women. So when we actually make the policy, or when we actually work on this, we should also keep this in mind, what I believe. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with a few points, but I think we've established there are lots of networks out there, right? And one of the big learning is that how does the network influence us back? So I think we will need an inside out approach to continue to build the resilience of the network. How are we looking? I mean, we're using a lot of words here, but how do we make sure that it's inclusive? How do we make sure we have access to the tools that are required to be able to build this kind of network? So I think that's going to be a very critical aspect of this. I think the second thing is to also make, I mean, the word being used over here is entrepreneurship and not an open-ended livelihood thing. So if it's entrepreneurship, then we have to treat it as entrepreneurship. And I think even the women themselves, even the most backward areas that we're going to, women are saying, oh, some government person came and they gave us this, and I don't want to do this. You know, I don't. So I think there's that we have to also treat women's entrepreneurship as entrepreneurship, and make a distinction between what the objectives of the network are and what the themes the network will be. Because I think we're sort of bringing both up when we're having this conversation. So what the network will focus in terms of themes will be distinct, but what the larger objectives are, I think those are different. And here I think again why women are being left behind, particularly as the economy is changing, whether it's being part of digital or looking at innovative finance, that's going to be important. I think who is part of the network, Chetna ji had started that. I really think that is going to be critical because you had mentioned that, you know, there's the who are the network people and who are the stakeholders. I feel like we might need to mix it up a bit because there are organizations, there are intermediaries that are working, and in MasterCard you had mentioned HSBC, there are institutions who might be willing to be part of it and can actually contribute well.
So I was hearing the discourse and I was reflecting back that the kind of work we are doing at the grassroots level and the challenges we are facing on a day-to-day basis. Like while I shared that we have 60% of the center run by the women, some of the women applied for the Mudra loan, Shishu loan, and they were denied. The thing is, when we are talking about policy, I think we should also take into consideration that there are certain things, certain provision in place, but it's not functioning at the grassroots level. When we are trying to avail it, it's not being provided. So why this is not happening? It's not about policy, it's about how that policy is being implemented on field and who is the person. Like we are having a discussion with a bank manager and he gives a hoot about whether it's a woman entrepreneur or a male entrepreneur. These are the things which need to be done. And I think in case of Alva, we encourage some of the women to apply, and they applied. And there is a whole lot of 50-60 women entrepreneur in Alva. So after getting rejected, 5 application got rejected. So in that case, rest of the women, they feel like why to apply for it. And we also see a dropout also because that kind of a scaffolding is not there for the women. So they are taking one step at a time. And if you don't have that kind of a like support system, to actually help her to reach to that stage where she will be independent enough to uh, to to gather all the resources by her own. But that till that phase, how you are going to support? So I was reflecting on how this network is actually going to support the fight we are fighting at the grassroots level. Yeah.
Thank you. And it's a snakes and ladders game, isn't it? You have to keep providing the ladder every time she slips down. Yeah, you want what?
हाँ, मेरा कहना यहाँ पर ये है कि जैसा कि काफ़ी लोगों ने बताया भी है कि एंटरप्रेन्योरशिप ज़रूरी है सभी के लिए, महिलाओं के लिए सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है। और सारे एसएचजीज़ वर्कर जो है उसको स्मॉल स्केल पे स्टार्ट करते हैं और फिर बिग लेवल पे ले आने की बात है। लेकिन बहुत सारे चैलेंजेस जो फेस करते हैं वो जैसे हम लोग भी काम करें दिल्ली के अंदर और जैसे कोलकाता में, तो दिल्ली के अंदर कम से कम 75 से अबव एसएचजीज़ हैं जो काम कर रहे हैं। लेकिन उसमें से अगर आप देखेंगे तो 70 या 15 के अबव है जो ग्रुप में काम कर रहे हैं, बाकी सारे इंडिविजुअल काम करने को ज़्यादा। लेकिन उसमें सबसे बड़ी चैलेंज क्या आते हैं, बैंक के साथ बहुत ज़्यादा चैलेंजेस लोगों को फेस करना पड़ता है, जैसे अभी हमारे साथी ने भी बताया। तो वहाँ पर क्या है, उससे एक तो बैंक्स में स्टाफ की सबसे जब भी जाओ तो स्टाफ की कमी, तो उसमें क्या है कि महिलाएं नहीं पहुँच, जब भी जाएँ तो महिलाएं वापस आती है, फिर उतना फेडअप होती है कि कहते दोबारा क्यों जाए, क्योंकि आप वहाँ अगर वो बैठा भी है तो वहाँ पर जो मैनेजर उसको भी जानकारी उतनी नहीं दी जाती कि आप ऐसे जी इस तरह करना। तो वहाँ पर एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज उनके साथ फेस करना पड़ा, और महिलाओं को टाइम टू टाइम लाना एक बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है अपने आप में। और दूसरा अगर आप देखेंगे तो हमने जो बनाए वहाँ पर, तो लेकिन होता है थोड़ा सा काम चलता है, लेकिन गवर्नमेंट, जैसे किसी ने बोला भी कि गवर्नमेंट को इन्वॉल्व भी करना बहुत जरूरी है। दिल्ली के अंदर आप चाहे किसी भी स्टेट में जाएंगे, गवर्नमेंट जहाँ जुड़ती है साथ में, तो नेटवर्क बहुत अच्छी तरह से चल सकते हैं। हम लोग तो चल ही रहे हैं, कर ही रहे हैं। जैसे हमारे 2 नेटवर्क हम चल रहे हैं, दिल्ली में चला भी रहे हैं, तो उसमें क्या हम जो यहाँ ऑब्जेक्टिव नेटवर्क का ये जरूर होना चाहिए, जिससे कि महिलाएं और ज़्यादा अपने आप को सशक्त बना सकें। क्योंकि इंटरप्रेन्योरशिप में अगर सारे रहेंगे तो हमारा जो नेटवर्क है उसमें हम क्या करते हैं, जो हमने अभी तक अपने अप्लाई कर रहे हैं कि उसमें शेयरिंग एक्सचेंज जो की जाती है, और दूसरे ग्रुप्स के लोग भी बताते हैं, दूसरे एनजीओज के लोग भी अपनी शेयरिंग करते हैं, और जो वो पर्टिकुलर लाइवलीहुड चला रहे हैं उससे क्या हमारे दूसरे यहाँ के एसएचजी सीख पाते हैं। और ऐसी हमने क्या कैपेसिटी बिल्ड की जाती है उसमें, और मेंटरशिप उसके अंदर दी जाती है, जिससे कि अभी हमने 2 उनकी डिजिटल ट्रेनिंग कराई महिलाओं की, तो उनको पता चला कि हम कैसे अपने आप को फेसबुक में एंट्री कर सकते हैं। बहुत सारे लोग, क्योंकि एजुकेटेड है, सम एजुकेटेड, सारे एजुकेटेड नहीं है वहाँ देखेंगे तो। और उनके साथ सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज जो देखा जाता है कि हमें जो महिलाएं हैं जिनके साथ काम करें, उनको डॉक्यूमेंट्स की जानकारी बहुत जरूर देनी है। जो डॉक्यूमेंट्स, लोगों के डॉक्यूमेंट्स ही नहीं है, आपने एसएचजीज बना लिए, लेकिन लोगों के पास ना तो आपका आधार कार्ड अपडेट ही नहीं है उनको पता चला डेट ऑफ बर्थ नहीं डाली है, तो बैंक रिजेक्ट कर देता है। आप आगे जाएं, कहीं भी जाएंगे तो उसको, क्योंकि आप देखेंगे अगर कोई भी लोन लेंगे तो उसके अंदर आपकी सिविल ठीक होनी चाहिए, सिविल ठीक नहीं है, किसी ने लोन लिया बच्चे के लिए, तो वो उसमें से रिजेक्ट कर देते हैं। तो हमारे जो जितने भी ग्रुप्स में है ज़्यादातर, या जो भी हम काम कर रहे हैं, हमने देखा है कि महिलाओं को सबसे ज़्यादा हम लोगों को उनके डॉक्यूमेंट्स पे ज़्यादा भी ध्यान देना चाहिए जो हम जोड़ रहे हैं उनके साथ, और उनको टाइम टू टाइम पे हमें मेंटरिंग भी करनी है। चाहे वो जेंडर सेशन की बात करें, वो भी जानना कि नहीं तो क्या है कि टाइम ही सबसे वहाँ पर शॉर्टेज होता है। और इसके साथ साथ ये जो महिलाएं भी हमने जो किया है यहाँ पर, 2 इंटरप्रेन्योरशिप जो अगर हमने भी स्थापित किए, तो सैनिटरी पैड का एक हमने महिलाओं को जोड़ के बायोडिग्रेडेबल सैनिटरी पैड बनाए हैं, जो एक चलता हमारा गौतमपुरी में। और सेकंड वन हमने अभी दोना पत्तल महिलाओं का एक इंटरप्रेन्योरशिप स्टार्ट किया है छोटा सा, जिन्होंने अभी रिसेंटली किया है। उससे हाँ, और उसी के साथ में जो कुछ एनजीओ है जिससे कि हमने ट्रेनिंग उनको दी है, जिससे कि मार्केटिंग स्किल की सबसे बड़ा चैलेंज, मार्केटिंग स्किल नहीं है उनके पास, नहीं मिल पाती है क्योंकि वो अपने काम से बड़े। तो हमने मार्केटिंग के लिए भी कई सारी एनजीओज और सीएसओ को पार्टनर को जोड़ा है, जिससे को ट्रेनिंग उनको करा पा रही है। तो ये सारी चीज़ मेरे ख्याल से अगर हम देखेंगे तो ये हमारा ऑब्जेक्ट काम करेगा।
I mean, there are already a lot of points covered, and some of them are so critical. And I think everybody brings in so much of experience in the entrepreneurship space. While I was listening to everybody, I'm just trying to sort of take a step back and, come back to the, question on what can this network do if you're thinking of going further. And in my opinion, I just feel like
we talk about policy, and everybody's talking about policy, the influence that we need to have at a policy level. But what does it require? And I think it requires evidence generation. And also, a lot of people spoke about how we need to build a case for the government, and not just government, but other stakeholders. It can be companies. It can be a lot of stakeholders in the ecosystem. And also that this can't be one organization's responsibility, and we all bring in so much of knowledge and learning from the projects. For example, the DA, the entrepreneurship program on women's empowerment that we have, one of the very powerful examples is an e-mobility project that we run, which is right now in just one district, but we know what the potential of that can be. And if we can all, as a network, sort of have something in terms of a booklet and evidence where all of us are contributing our case studies or experiences with the data, with the evidence. I think that is it's more like an activity, but I also think that it is something that you can at least start thinking in that direction, to do something more concrete, and of course while having the meta narrative about what we want to do as well. Yeah.
I think Chetna has been waiting, and then
Sorry.
it's okay. We are on second round now. I'll just check that everybody's okay.
If I can see a couple of hands raised, so
Are they, yeah, so we can go
So,
next.
I again would emphasize, like,
Let's keep it 2 minutes now for second round. Yeah.
that can we focus on, say, 1, 2, 3 in that way for the alliance also. And I would just third, what are the some good practices or something. Let me narrate our own experience at Mandeshi Bank. In spite of all women's bank, in spite of all women at operation, for mission of the bank is for women entrepreneur, let me also submit that 25% of our loan, what you mentioned, no, वो महिलाओं के नाम पे है, लेकिन एक्चुअली महिलाओं को नहीं दिए हैं. With us, I'm saying why, and then I'm coming why it is happening. Sidbi is telling us like 3 महीने में आप हमको 25 करोड़ लोन महिलाओं को बांट दो, और हम लोग कह रहे हैं नहीं, हम लोग कर ही नहीं सकते हैं, right? Now, what are the reasons? I'm not going into detail, but what are the things which are not there in ecosystem? Credit score, pre-credit score, digital transaction history of women or trajectory of women entrepreneurs, scale of the business, not sure. My own capacity as a lender, I don't know how to do it. I mean, even Mandeshi staff is getting nervous. No collateral, so unsecured loans. So these are the challenges, even if I want to follow the good practices. There are answers to it, but those answers will come by forming some public goods for women, like credit. I mean, not repeating. And mentoring is required to the lender for that. And so some tangible thing alliance can work on. That's what I was trying to say.
Next one to go is Yamini.
I thought there was like.
So are we going across the table now?
No.
I think I have literally like 30
more
seconds.
and then we summarize.
Just on the policy.
Because we also need to just
consolidate.
See that the 3-4 things which are coming out are agreed with everyone. So we need time for that.
So 30 seconds just on the policy piece. I know we keep talking policy, and I think we're thinking women's entrepreneurship policy, which is a good North Star at the end of the day with some big budget and a mission. I think everyone has somewhere in our lives we have designed a women's entrepreneurship mission, and those documents exist. But I think there's lots of small p policies, which is at the level of regulation, right? So one of the examples, in fact, we're just doing some landscaping now on food, one of the most traditional sectors, which is food. The revamping of the food sector now is cloud kitchens and so on. And so for women to get licenses, the FSSAI regulation is really, really challenging. So I think for the alliance or the network, an input is also to go with some of these small tangible regulatory pieces which can have huge unlocks, because those sectors are so huge and so important for women. While we keep a North Star on, we want the big push, we want this big visibility thing, but I think there's a ramp that we can build, and this wisdom in the room is quite huge in even just pulling together a list of those 10 small p policies that we want changed in specific states or specific sectors.
Very quick, huh? And then we start consolidating.
Yeah, just 1 minute. So basically, even I have jotted down my points, which I'll give it to you. So basically, it's a multi stakeholder. Our experiences are very different. So I think this forum going forward, you can have 2 3 small deliberations in terms of practitioners viewpoints, regional needs, and then second, documentation is very important because we speak a lot from our experiences, but there is no formal, and that's the arduous task. So document findings, and the third is then try and impact policy at whatever levels, because this is really a huge factor.
Yeah, very two very short points. Okay. Yeah. No, maybe he's got a split. And Meenakshi. So, first is, I mean, I think to operate on mission mode in any of these, there are 2 3 points that have come right on financing, and mission mode is a smaller set of people coming together, resources, because that takes longer, that takes more intense effort. But to be able to show that, to demonstrate that, even then enhances the trust in the network that this can we can get things done together. So just looking at, whether it's finance, something in market, a private sector integration, something in policy uptake increase would be great. Second is, I think, the getting equal voice for all different types of heterogeneous stakeholders is a fairly complex task, and therefore that then devolves to saying, how do we ensure equal participation, equality in decision making, keep the trust on always. For that, a backbone is a very vital component of any kind of a network, which then abstracts a lot of this operating, invisible in the background, so that the engagement. So at Satwa, we anchor about 4-5 collaborators over the last 4-5 years, and we participate in 2-3 more. So the keeping the trust alive is a very, very important thing across. So how do we then, splitting the work of the network into the engagement structure and the operating structure, and making both of these very different in their aims. Engagement structure is really optimized for equality in decision making, participation, and accountability. We get this done, but we also make sure that together we're able to do. Operating structure is abstracting all the, from documentation to flow of resources, funds, to making sure the operating rhythm, we meet this often, we take forward, somebody takes forward all the 10 ideas that came out and take it to the next level, etc. So that's.
Thank you. Let me attempt this very difficult task, and you have to help me if we miss something. But I think, we started by saying, yes, let's do the network. We went very ambitious and so on, and then the voice of wisdom to say, let's focus, let's discover a niche. Maybe we don't get to being network of networks very fast, but if we come to, so the one thing I take is values as the foundation. So if we're building some sort of a tree, then values is the foundation. Equal voice or not, I don't know. Voice, yes. Equal, it never becomes. Yeah. So as a vision, as an objective, great. How equal it is, we have to see, because then the structures and the processes of the network will need to be set and developed like that. And of course, trust as the foundation, which you can see the result of, because today in the round there's already existing trust, and so we can talk like this, but it needs to be built in with every new member that's coming. The second thing I'm hearing is in terms of objectives. So I hear 4 levels here. One is the grassroots, which is capacity building, mentoring, making sure that women entrepreneurship succeeds in whichever NGOs that we are working with or working in. And the second is institutional products, processes, attitudes. This is mostly for the financial sector and sometimes the government. Then we are hearing knowledge sharing. So knowledge sharing tools, capacity building, mentoring, again now this time at the institutional level, not just at the entrepreneur level. And so however good work we do in terms of creating entrepreneurs or creating capacities, one needs to consolidate that and show others how to scale up. So those tools are really important. Sharing lessons are important. So knowledge sharing would be a great, I mean, a really big bucket there. And then, of course, policy and its implementation, right? So that's what one is hearing. We are also hearing that let's focus, let's have a niche. Um, let's have a small group of people maybe beginning and do it in mission mode, and then slowly plan a strategy for growth. Yeah, so this is, I think, and on also another thing which Chetna started with is let's do something that we are beginning to be heard very soon. Don't delay that too much. So let's have a strategy by which we have something important to say that very soon, establish. So this thing is a chicken and egg thing, you know, establishing your credibility, then growing your structure, then establishing your credibility, growing your structure. So that's an iterative thing, but I would say, you know, we've got a good start today, and thank you for your inputs. I'd hand over to Vipin for some comments. Yeah, thank you, Vipin.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, everybody. I think we had some very good discussions, some excellent ideas came up during the 2 hours, and so I mean, nobody's saying no to setting up a network or an alliance and all that. So that's a good beginning. Uh, so I mean, if you look at women entrepreneurship issues, then there are so many, and if you want to take up everything, then that can actually complicate matters also. I feel, now that we've discussed and come up with so many things, so what should the network focus on? Typically these networks, I mean, whether it's a CII or a FICCI or something, they're oriented to, influence and inform policy. So I mean, largely the big focus needs to be not operational but more ecosystem level, looking at policymakers, looking at regulators, and certainly looking at, so if we're talking about the private sector, can this network, say, influence the private sector to contribute more through the CSR on women entrepreneurship? So how do we go about that? So only yesterday we were brainstorming that around, say, the International Women's Day, can we influence the market players to highlight women products? So if I go and talk to a Damodar Mal to say all your Reliance stores celebrate women products or something like that, talk to a Flipkart, Amazon to say let's highlight, this week, like you do. I mean, only so put something where buyer knows that this is made by woman. So patronizing that product. Then, of course, I mean, what we need to do is look at programs of the government, look at policies of the government. So, all well intentioned, but how do they operate on the ground is what we need to look at. And this is, I feel, a network which is not looking at gaps in how the government is dealing with these issues, but gaps which need to plug for government intentions to do better on the ground. So, I mean, that orientation, I think, needs to be in that nature. There was a good idea that should we only focus at the national level and national policies, but also look at states. So yeah, in some states, there is a progressive bureaucrat who sits there and he can push things quickly. So it's not that we only focus at the national level, we can also look at state level. At Access, we are trying to engage with a few ministries to see whether there could be something like a national task force on women entrepreneurship. And any ministry you go to, they feel that if so, they all liking the idea, but nobody wants to take the bull by its horns. So to say, okay, we will set it up, because they feel that the moment we set up something like that, is going to be additional burden onto us. Then somebody, if the PM or somebody, will hold us accountable. "ये आपने बनाई थी, क्या हुआ इसके अंदर?" or something like that. So those are some kind of challenges. So we are then trying to go back to the government to say, don't call it a national task force. Maybe you should have some benign kind of a label to it, say national platform for women in entrepreneurship, so that may not be so threatening. So so we need to, I mean, so as Access, if we do these things, has a certain, impact, but if we do it as a group, I think it has a much bigger impact. So we need to look at it, I mean, and not trying to do everything, maybe. So in some networks, there are some smaller groups. So like if we ask Chetna to lead on the challenges relating to finance, somebody can take on, a subgroup relating to markets, and we have small groups of 10 people working on that issue and all that. And at the end of the day, yes, I mean, we need to get some thought leaders to come up and help us with a policy paper. So maybe we should come up with one policy paper on finance and then submit it to the RBI and to the DFS and all that. We can have another one on markets. So I think if we think a little more, I mean, we can make it very exciting, we can make it very purposeful, and we can certainly get good impact and outcome out of it. Maybe, I mean, we ran out of time. It's happening on the sidelines of the summit and all that. We need to maybe look at another opportunity where maybe a smaller group can come and look at what the structure will be, how we will sustain the network, and all that kind of stuff. And then we will share it with a larger group to see how they like the idea. And once we get that input, we can have another larger convening, is what I feel, how we can conclude this.
Thank you. Thank you, Vipin. So a smaller group first, and then getting larger, structuring a little bit, and then getting larger. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for all your inputs and wonderful.
Thank you, Smita.
Tea or coffee, please feel free to have it. We have it all arranged. And thank you so much.
Given the network a name, the O Network. Advancing women.
Wow, very nice.